curse that fiends their children too, and their children forever true. A call to the bloodless wherever they be. Mother is dead, her baby take. Mother is dead, her baby take. Scales are suffering the grief of cause. Do you hear it? A sealless void, the lair of beasts, where the blood-crazed roam.
Bananas, black and blood, blasphemous murders, blood-crazed fiends, atonement for the wretches, by the wrath of Mother Curse, atonement for the wretches. Lay the curse of blood upon them, and their children, and their children's children forevermore.
One of the most important events in Bloodborne is the massacre at the fishing hamlet, and I wish to examine this event in some detail, look at some themes that are explored within. The Hunter's Nightmare is a construct of sin, a world created by the sins of the past. In this video I want to discuss these events of the Hamlet Massacre, which is defined as I see it by three powerful ideas: original sin or ancestral fault, the trespass of a sacred covenant, and the idea of blood curses. Before we begin, I'd like to thank JSF and Sinclair Lore, who both chatted to me about this in a more informal manner in a previous podcast which I will link below, and I thank them for that. Chapter 1, Ancestral Fault. How we experience the Hunter's Nightmare is like a journey back through time, a journey back through the crimes of those who came before us. We first experience a very familiar memory, which is the slaughter of beasts on the streets of Yharnam. Except this is a twisted reflection of that. It is a purgatory, where those who have lost their minds are damned to murder their defenceless victims over and over again. The church agent, Simon, tells us of this curse and why this hellscape exists.
Do you know why the hunters are drawn to this nightmare? Because it sprouted from their very misdeeds. Things that some would rather keep secret. A pitiful tale of petty arrogance, really. High time someone exposed the whole charade.
Later, near the end of his journey, he laments, "So our forefathers sinned. We hunters cannot bear their weight forever. It isn't fair. It just isn't fair." This is much like the quote of Solon that you saw at the beginning of this video, which I'll briefly read again. "The guiltless will pay for the deeds later, either the man's children or his descendants thereafter." This is the concept of ancestral fault, or later known as original sin. It was a cultural view that implied that though we are innocent, we must pay the price owed from those who came before us, and they exist in the normative sense of collective shame and guilt that certain communities or societies may feel from past actions. Yet this idea is more expanded upon in Christianity in the concept of the original sin, as I mentioned before. The original sin is the sin committed by Adam and Eve by eating the fruit in the Garden of Eden, and that sin was inherited by every single human. It is the state of all humans who are born, and that is a very basic interpretation of the original sin. I particularly like the way it is characterised by Nathaniel Slott, who rewrote the text for Ludwig's Dance of Death. It says this: "Think on Adam's bankruptcy, which brought you all in debt to me." So as this quote neatly characterises, it is not necessarily anything that we have done wrong, yet we must pay the debt. And as a hunter in Bloodborne, it is the normative state of things for a hunter. We are born to fall to the blood-drunk curse that was born from the transgression of something sacred. This crime, this transgression, dates very far back into the history of the hunters, and we must go back to the very beginning of this tale, back to the events that unfolded at the fishing hamlet. Chapter 2, Sacred Covenant. From the current bloodshed on the streets of Yharnam, we move further back in this nightmare, to the earlier days of the church, to the research hall. We know this is the early days of the healing church, for the fruit of this research, the brain fluid, reads as follows. In the early days of the healing church, the great ones were linked to the ocean, and so the cerebral patients would imbibe water and listen for the howl of the sea. Brain fluid writhed inside the head, the initial makings of internal eyes. This research and the crimes committed here against the poor test subjects are a further fruit born of the crime committed by the hunters of Byrgenwerth at the fishing hamlet years before, and so we will begin there and go past the research hall, further into the nightmare. This single act committed by the hunters all these years ago is one of the most important in all of Bloodborne lore. It was an act that was so wrong, it was a violation, a transgression.
Please, I need you to do something. This village is the true secret, testament to the old sins. It feeds this hunter's nightmare. Please, bring to an end the horror.
This is the secret buried beneath the centre of the nightmare, and it is the heart of everything. It is a testament to old sins, i.e. it is a horrifying recreation of those events that happened back then. These events began as per the description of the Kos parasite, which reads as follows. When the carcass of Kos washed up on the coast, its insides were teeming with tiny parasites unlike any found in humans. The corpse of Kos washed up on the shore. It has long been hypothesised by Redgrave and others that this town resembles a whaling town, and of a town that would process and use the products harvested from whales, which explained the processing facility or refinery, the wrecked ships off town, also seemed to be further evidence towards this, as to the function of this town, that these could have been whaling or at least fishing ships. Therefore some take the function of the village as evidence that Kos was killed by the denizens of the village, and then she washed ashore, and provided the village with a bountiful, never-ending crop in parasites. There is a concept in Japan known as the drifting ashore god. This would be an auspicious event in where a large whale would either come to be beached or trapped in the shallows nearby a village. This whale would then provide a large amount of sustenance, fuel and resources for a small village, to the point where it would seem like a gift from a god. In time, due to the resources provided by these whales, they were considered to be deities of sorts, and cults would spring up around them in coastal villages, and they are known as the drifting ashore gods. A cult being built around the corpse of something that is eaten and consumed by a village. We can see this exact sort of relationship evolving in the fishing hamlet. One day a god floated to shore and provided an endless bounty. In time a sacred pact was established between the people of the village and Mother Kos, mother to the village. A cult was established in her name, the people prayed to her, and a priesthood was established to maintain the religion. A divine covenant and a symbolic relationship were built, and it was a sacred thing. We can see the symbiotic nature of this relationship, given that the people of this village become more aquatic, and like Kos herself, who is appearing to be an aquatic being. But word would soon spread, for the villagers did not know what Kos really was. Yet there was a group of scholars dedicated to finding out more about Kos and her kin. Chapter 3: The Crime. A powerful covenant had been established in the fishing hamlet, and the hunters were less than respectful of their divine relationship. Hearing word that a village hamlet was worshipping the corpse of a great being would have piqued the interest in the Byrgenwerth scholars, who had already dedicated themselves to studying that of the Great One. We can also possibly assume that the Byrgenwerth scholars had only seen signs of the Great Ones through their parasites and other augurs, but rather hearing about the corpse of a Great One themselves, too great an opportunity to turn down. We know that they came here, firstly from the dialogue of the fishing hamlet priest, who says this:
Byrgenwerth, blasphemous murderers, blood-crazed fiends.
And then we have the accursed brew item description. We can see that it is the skull of a village denizen, and you can see a similar art asset hanging from the trees in the village, suggesting that not many survived this brutal examination, and their defiled corpses were hung as grim reminders. When we reach Maria in the dream, she says this:
A corpse should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly.
Redgrave in his Pale Blood hunt which I highly recommend you read if for some reason you haven't read it, and I'll link that below, cites this phrase and believes that instead of it being about Maria herself, she's in fact talking about the corpse of Cos, and I agree with this interpretation. She says this because she was there upon the raid on the fishing hamlet. She was part of the heavies sent by the Bergenworth scholars to tear up this village and find evidence of the Great Ones. Redgrave goes on to describe a series of events which I more or less agree with, and he states this. Gurman, the first hunter, travelled along with his greatest pupil Maria to the hamlet and butchered the kin. The skulls were split open in search of eyes, and the first hunters carved a path towards the corpse of Cos. It is there that their greatest blasphemy was committed. Gurman and Maria discovered that the dead Cos had been pregnant, the unborn fetus still intact. In the nightmare, we experience a manifestation of the orphan that is a manifestation of his rage and suffering, yet isn't a real reflection of what it actually would have been in real life. The orphan that would have been encountered by Gurman and Maria would have been a defenceless thing. Maria and Gurman would have taken the corpse, the unborn fetus, and allowed it to be desecrated by the Bergenworth scholars. The corpse of a god handled so irreverently, its child pulled out and dissected for a greater understanding into the Great Ones. This harkens back to the speech of the Hamlet priest upon entering the village, who says this about the child.
Mercy for the poor wizened child. Mercy. Oh, please.
The treatment of this religious cult, the violation of the corpse, and the child of a being who is known to be a god, is a shocking event. It is a crime against humanity and against the order of the cosmos. It is a crime that was never faced up to, and in fact was buried and swept under the rug, buried deep within the consciousness of those who committed it. It would take the concerted efforts of Simon and ourselves to expose the whole charade, to quote him. Not only this memory is hidden, but it is kept far away and locked down by Brador, an assassin of the church, who will kill anyone who has had sight of the memory.
The beast you seek will not be found here. Go back to your hunt, and if you have the chance, put this night behind you. Places better left untouched, secrets better left alone. Only a forward so brazenly roam.
A further way that the church will suppress the truth about the crimes that were committed by those who came before them, the Bergenworth scholars. Chapter 4. The Wrath of Mother Cos. These crimes and the irreverent way of dealing with a divine being is a blood crime that gives power to the real wrath of Mother Cos. Cos is physically dead, but she is a great one. Her existence and her being is beyond the physical world or beyond our understanding. She has power, so when this crime occurs, and those Hamlet worshippers call upon her, call upon those transgressors to be cursed, something real actually happens. They invoke their sacred covenant with their god. The survivors of the massacres, either in the real world or their recreations in the nightmare, lay a blood curse upon the hunters.
Curse the fiends, their children too, and their children forever true. A call to the bloodless wherever they be.
Mother is dead, her baby taken. Mother is dead, her baby taken. Scales are suffering the grief of Cos. Do you hear it? A sealless void, the lair of beasts, where the blood-crazed roam.
One part of this chanting that is most relevant to me is the part that says, "Lay the curse upon them." Once again, this harkens back to the Bible, but a different story this time. In the New Testament, the book of Matthew, it is during Pilate's pronunciation of the sentencing of Jesus Christ, where he talks to the crowd about who's to blame and who's got the blood on their hands, and the conversation kind of goes like this. When Pilate saw that he was not succeeding at all, but that a riot was breaking out instead, he took water and washed his hands in the sight of a crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. Look to it yourselves." And the whole people said in reply, "His blood be upon us and upon our children." In the Bible passage I just read, the people in the crowd take the blame for the death of the child of a god, yet in Bloodborne it's slightly different in that the hunters do not take the blame at all. and in fact the blame and the blood curse is laid upon them by the worshippers of that god, rather than it being a self-laid curse as it is in the passage I just read to you. I find the parallels pretty interesting here, as it gives us an idea of the nature of the curse of Kos, of the wrath of Kos, that it is something that is bestowed upon a people, and it will carry on through the generations for something that was not done by the people who inherit it. After the desecration of her child and her worshippers, an endless curse is laid upon the hunters, by condemning them to fall to blood drunkenness. It is a curse that is known to the hunter community, and it is one that affects us all. We are all damned to fall to it by taking up the hunt. The hunters of hunters are the ones who have the job, who are tasked to bury these embarrassments to the hunter community.
Look at you, you sorry drunk. I'll string you up like the filthy beast you are. You shall not abscond your crimes. Were you not once a hunter? Few hunters can resist the intoxication of the hunt.
As Aileen says here, the intoxication of the hunt is something that leads to the inevitable downward spiral towards blood drunkenness, a state where we completely lose our minds and lose ourselves to our most violent urges. From the old Hunters DLC, we now see that this is in part the cause of the curse of Mother Kos, and that those who follow will fall to their bloodlust. Not only that, but there is a special world, a special hell, for these people to go to at the end of their blood drunkenness, the Hunter's Nightmare. This is a purgatory, where though cursed, every hunter will eventually be trapped by their crimes and the crimes of those who came before them. The Hunters of Hunters try to stop this and give release to the blood drunk before they are drawn into this hell, into this nightmare, for Aileen's attire reads as follows. The first Hunter of Hunters came from a foreign land, and gave the dead a virtuous native ritual, rather than impose a blasphemous Yarnum burial service upon them, with the hope that former compatriots might be returned to the skies and find rest in a hunter's dream. We have the hunter's equivalents of hell in the nightmare, and their heaven, which is the hunter's dream, referred to in this text from Aileen's outfit. It is the Hunters of Hunters who protect the legacy and the reputation of the hunters by killing their shameful brethren. Pre-DLC we didn't understand why this happened, but now we understand what truly is the cause of this blood drunkenness, and unfortunately what the end state of this is. We hear a chant as we are drawn into the hunter's nightmare.
Curse the fiends, their children too.
The fiends being referred to are of course the hunters, the same title being bestowed upon them in the original curse that I played at the beginning of the video from the words of the Hamlet priest, and the curse being that of losing one's mind to blood drunkenness and being drawn into the hellscape of the hunter's nightmare to be punished in the shadows of our sins. One of the tormented is Ludwig, the horse, who endlessly kills the cursed over and over at the river of blood.
An unsightly beast. A great terror looms. Ludwig the Accursed is coming.
This to me calls to mind the Buddhist concept of Avicii, which is the lowest level of hell, essentially where only the most sinful go. In this hell, when one dies, they are reborn in the same place to suffer for all eternity. And in a way, this nightmare plays the same role of that eternal hell, to punish sinners, where people are killed by Ludwig over and over again. Notably, one of the other parallels between this is that one of the reasons one can get sent to Avicii is by killing an Arat, an enlightened being, which is certainly relevant when we consider the murder of Kos as the cause of everything here. Yet why are we so certain that this curse and the events of the Hamlet Massacre birthed the nightmare and the blood drunkenness? Well, if the evidence and the parallels presented aren't enough, it can be simply a matter of dream geography. All dreams are layered on top of each other, in the dream worlds and the dream lands as we could call them. And at the centre of this nightmare, at the core of this dream, under the various layers, is the Hamlet Massacre, which is the heart or core of this nightmare. The simple chant by the villagers was given power by Mother Kos herself, and the blood of her child any powerful blood curse took root into the line of hunters who would follow. This is the rotten core of the hunter's heritage, inheriting the curse, the inevitable downfall, brought upon us by the actions of those who came before us. So thanks guys, I hope you liked that interpretation of the Hamlet Massacre and the events that took place there and the ramifications of it and how it's kind of the centre of a lot of bad things that can happen to the hunters. If you like this video, please subscribe and follow me for more, as I always do tons of Soulsborne videos and I'm definitely planning to do more Bloodborne. If you want to join the debate, please check out my Discord server where we all kind of talk about this lore, and it'd be really great to have you there. Finally, I'd like to say thanks to JSF and Sinclair Lore again for chatting this through. Again, our original discussion in the podcast is down below. I thank them for all the discussions we had. Thanks to my patrons. And finally, thanks to you guys for watching this. I hope you have a nice day. See you again soon.